Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Today, it's Bryan Edward Hill. Really excited to talk to him. We check back on his Top Cow series that he did with Matt Hawkins and Isaac Goodhart called Postal. We also talk about his Wildstorm work with Michael Cray. We get into his writing on television. He's doing the Titans TV show for DC Universe's streaming service. And this week, his detective run wraps up a great 5-issue story. Really have enjoyed it. Batman, Black Lightning, and a lot of Batman sidekicks, all dealing with a very interesting challenge as far as a villain. A brand new villain that I think makes a lot of sense, and I'm kind of hoping that we'll see more of this villain in the future. Tough gig to come in and just hit it out of the park with Detective, given James Tynan's excellent run and what's coming next. But hats off to Bryan Edward Hill for pulling it off. It's a great run, and I can't wait to talk to him. But I have to share with you the incredible experience I had at Terrificon last weekend at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. Yes, they were a sponsor for Word Balloon. Full disclosure, they flew me out. They bought advertising, but they also gave me 8 panels of incredible comic book history conversation that I cannot wait to share with you on Word Balloon. And I felt, well, we're going back to school, and this is all comic book history. Let's call it Word Balloon 101. Word Balloon University is opening for this semester for an 8-week course in comic book history, featuring the likes of Roy Thomas, Don McGregor, Christopher Priest, Bob Allman, the great inker that worked with Sal Velluto on the Black Panther books, Denny O'Neil, Jim Starlin, Joe Rubenstein. So many great stories, not only about the works, but also behind the scenes at DC and Marvel. You are in for a treat. So Word Balloon 101 will be happening at the end of each week, and we will be presenting some incredible conversations from Terrificon between some of these amazing creators. 80 Years of Superman, a look at the Robin Boy Wonder history of all the various Robins. Really, really great stuff. Mike Barr, Denny O'Neil, Pete Tomasi, Tim Seeley. Just a great bunch of conversations. Dave Michelini, an incredible conversation about Venom. All this coming in the weeks ahead here on Word Balloon. I hope you'll join me for that. But again, today, the focus, Bryan Edward Hill and his incredible work on Detective. It's a great conversation. I can't wait to share it with you on today's Word Balloon. Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. The League is made up of Word Balloon subscribers via Patreon at wordballoon.com, and you can click on the Patreon ad, or you can go to patreon.com/wordballoon. Now, as a special thank you to the League of Word Balloon listeners, if you want a deep dive and an advanced listen to all the great Terrificon panels, the only place to do that will be at my Patreon page. I will be putting these out, as I said, at the end of each week, but if you want to get them all very quickly, you can do that by subscribing to Word Balloon. Thank you for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by In-Stock Trades at InStockTrades.com. Bryan Edward Hill, some really great stuff is waiting for you at In-Stock Trades. Mostly his run on Postal. All 6 volumes are there, 1 through 6, at 42% off the cover price. Let's see, Volume 1 is $5.79, Volume 2 is $8.69, Volume 3 is also $8.69, Volume 4 is $8.69, Volume 5 is $9.85, Volume 6, the final volume, is also $9.85. So just be aware of that, but tremendous story, and we talk a bit about it and preview it in our conversation with Bryan. You're going to want to check out Postal, and I'm sure in the years to come we'll be getting more volumes of Bryan Edward Hill product at InStockTrades.com. Great books at great prices, InStockTrades.com. All right, without further ado, let's get into our great conversation with Bryan Edward Hill. Really informative. Great stuff. I mean, he's working on Detective. He's worked on the first season of the Titans TV series for DC Universe. We talk Postal. We talk about Michael Cray and the Wildstorm universe. And Bryan's got a lot to say, and he's a really interesting guy. I have a feeling that this is the beginning of many Bryan Edward Hill conversations here at Word Balloon. But here's the first one. Bryan Edward Hill, now on Word Balloon. Bryan Edward Hill, welcome to Word Balloon. As I was just telling you off the air, long time coming, and I'm really glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
You know, Isaac Goodhart was the guy who alerted me to you back in the Postal days.
Sure.
And we'll get into detective, but I do want Batman fans to have the opportunity to dig back and read some of classic Bryan Edward Hill, if you will. Give us the elevator pitch on Postal.
Sure. Well, Postal was my first comic book, like long-term comic book project. I had done, a smattering of stuff, like a one-shot here, a short story there. But Postal is a Top Cow image book that I worked on with Matt Hawkins. It's about a small town in a place called Eden, Wyoming, that is entirely populated by criminals. And they're either fugitives or they're people that have served their time and they want a fresh start. So it's like this self-enclosed environment that has its own near draconian laws. And they're trying to find a way to live sort of in America, but outside of the system of government of America, off the grid, as it were. And the story is told through the protagonist, Mark, who is the postman of the town, who's also been diagnosed with Asperger's.
Okay.
And because he has such a fine attention for detail and a rather unique way of looking at the world, he serves kind of ipso facto as a detective. And the mayor of the town is his mother, Laura. So the story is really about how their family tries to keep order in a place that's always destined for chaos, with sins from the past always coming to threaten the present and the future.
That's awesome. That's great. Now, for the Asperger's portion of the story and everything, how did you research all that?
Well, it's really interesting, John. So Matt had come to me because we were, we'd have a coffee every now and then when I'd done like a comic book here, a comic book there. And I think I'd already sold a screenplay. So I'd moved out to LA, and Matt and I were, just sort of talking about what we could do. I reached out to him and said, I want to do a comic book, man. I want to really dig in, though. I want to do like a longer run on something. Do you have something there? And I thought it was, maybe there'd be like a Top Cow universe thing, like a Cyber Force or what have you, or
Sure.
what have you. And Matt's like, well, I had this idea about this town full of criminals and the postman, the son of the mayor, he has Asperger's and all that. Like, what do you think about that? And I thought it was really interesting. I was in the middle of reading a lot of Southern, crime fiction. I'm from Missouri originally, from St. Louis, Missouri. So, I come from the land of mosquitoes and cicadas and humidity.
Not
all
too
that,
far from Chicago, but yeah, like about 3 hours away.
Yeah, not too far, man. But Chicago's where everything cool starts.
Come on now. What kind of Cardinal fan are you to say such a thing? Come on.
It's funny. We would talk about Chicago like, well, Chicago, that's the city. You're going to the city.
I understand.
That's real. Chicago's real. But yeah, I always had a soft spot for that kind of fiction.
Okay.
And
Southern fiction, Southern crime fiction.
Yeah. And I was reading like Capote, like in Cold Blood and some other things. Sure. I think, I was like, I kind of get this vibe. So I just went back to my home office and I just wrote him 2 pages, kind of stream of consciousness, John. Like just, okay, I see this and I see this could happen and I see this. And then I think I sent him maybe 6 or 8 JPEGs of different things I'd grabbed from the internet, like images that were kind of in my mind or close to the images in my head.
Okay.
And I sent them all to Matt. Matt, he reviewed it, was like, yeah, this is cool. I like this. Why don't we co-write the first couple arcs, because, he had some specific things he wanted to kind of get out. And he's like, after that, if people are reading it, you can sort of take over. And that's what happened. So I co-wrote the first 2 arcs with Matt. And then the third arc, I just sort of took it over solo. I would still consult with him about, like, well, I'm planning on doing this and doing that and making this move so that he would be aware of it all. But yeah, and that wound up being about a 25-issue run, I think. Right. And, it was like the little book that could for, like people would find it and read it and they'd get invested into it. And it really introduced me into the entire world of comics. Having, a story that you're telling, an issue coming out every month, it's just invaluable how much that helps you as a writer to learn your craft, see the effect of your work, make adjustments. I mean, comics are so special in that way because you get that near instant feedback on what you're doing. And it's unlike anything in screenwriting or even television writing. It takes so much time between the time you finish something to, really get some feedback. And then most of the things you write, won't get made. Even if you make money off of them, they still won't get made.
I hear you.
You know,
or change on the set as it's being shot.
Or change.
Yeah.
Right. You know, so the kind of direct line from imagination to shelf that comics represent is a really special part of popular culture.
I always love hearing screenwriters that come to comics and really want to do them and stuff. And, you know, I just talked to, I think you know Joe Henderson, right, from Lucifer?
For sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah. And his latest Image book and stuff. And yeah, he basically said the same thing, that as great as it is to make things for film or television, how, you know, satisfying it is that what you write pretty much is what is made and then becomes a comic. So not surprised, but that's awesome. And, you know, I think Matt's a great high concept guy. I always love talking to Matt Hawkins. I think he's, you know, I give him credit for keeping Top Cow going in a very competitive comic book shelf, and it keeps getting more competitive and stuff. And I always give him credit for, you know, and he's always a pleasure to talk to. He's been on the show a few times. So
yeah, Matt's great. I mean, he's got such a thirsty mind, and he's always studying and learning, which I think is one of the most important aspects of being a writer, is just learning
constant
all the time, like making yourself in it. Yeah, constant curiosity. You're the eternal student, you know, when you're writing.
Absolutely.
And he's very much like that. You know, a lot of his ideas, they just come from really interesting places, like the nooks and crannies of possibility is the way I describe it. So it was great, you know, working with him on Postal, and I still work with him today. He's a good friend of mine, Matt. Like, you know, Matt is responsible for my career in comics. I always trace everything back to Matt, because if Matt hadn't started giving me an opportunity to have a platform, then I wouldn't have the platform I have now.
That's excellent. Now, what came between it? Did things come between Postal and Detective?
Well, TV came between Postal and Detective.
Talk to me about TV for a second, then.
So I was wrapping up Postal, and you know, it got optioned off to somebody, which sounds nice and fancy, but nearly everything gets optioned off to somebody, so that doesn't really mean very much.
Is it still like that, Brian? I mean, truly, I mean, because I know, I remember a few years ago, certainly, God, now it's almost been about 8 or 10 years ago, that was certainly the case, and it seemed, too, that the non-DC and Marvel stuff was certainly attractive to be optioned, because it was a lot easier to deal with, you know, creator owns versus, you know, the big corporations of even before Marvel was with Disney, you know, even when Marvel was just itself, and then, of course, DC and Warner's.
Well, yeah, it's still happening, John. It's just it's difficult all around to just get something made, right? So, you know, when you hear about something getting optioned, it sounds very, very shiny and fancy, but
okay.
You know, you're not talking about that much money up front, and then it heads into that jungle that we call a development process.
Sure.
Where most things die in the quicksand.
Yeah.
You know, clutching on to the best of intentions. So, yeah, people acquire ideas. We are in a acquisitions race, an arms race of concepts and intellectual property. Now, whether or not, you know, any of the missiles get fired, who knows? Like, there's a lot of... So people build, like, stockpiles of ideas, but it's still very difficult to get that green light. But when you do get something optioned, you get the press release, you know, you show up on Deadline, you show up in the Hollywood Reporter, and then anytime someone sees a new name, they got to find out who that new name is. Cool. Who's this person? So Mark Verheiden, who was the showrunner of Ash vs. Evil Dead,
former Word Balloon guest and a huge comic book writer himself. And
Mark is amazing. Just an amazing guy, right? And,
big fan.
And he, you know, because he's this awesome comic book fan, you know, he has this whole like museum in his house of awesome comic book art.
Oh,
you know,
that's fantastic. That doesn't surprise me.
Absolutely legit. Absolutely legit.
Battlestar Galactica also, and Falling Skies.
Yeah. Just a career. He's the showrunner on the new Swamp Thing show.
Oh,
on
wow.
The DC. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's him and James Wan.
Oh,
yep, it's Mark and James Wan.
Wow.
Yep. So Mark had, I think, either heard of Postal or read Postal, realized that I had some television pilot I'd written that I hadn't sold to anyone. But, you know, they were samples, right? So when you write something and people think it's good, but they can't buy it for this economic reason or this cultural trend reason, what have you. it turns into a writing sample,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then that floats around, and people read it. And I think Mark read the writing sample, read the comic, and was like, okay, well, this guy is kind of interesting. And he sat and he met with me in a coffee shop and just asked me if I'd be interested in working on season 3 of Ash vs. Evil Dead.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and that was my first season of television. I'd never worked in television before. I hadn't done any sort of like studio matriculation program.
Okay.
None of it. I mean, I had written shows and I'd studied how one makes a television show, but I hadn't at all, done any of the stuff people normally do. So I was a little intimidated, John, but I said yes, because I often do, and started working, on the show, and Mark was great. So that experience kind of stopped me from pursuing a lot of comic opportunities because I wanted to focus. I really wanted to be there for Mark on that show, all those demands and all of that. And I did that season. And then when I finished it, I thought, well, maybe I'll go back and I'll do some more comics now. Maybe I'll, create some IP or whatever, see what we're going to do. And then I wound up getting an offer to work on Titans very soon after Evil Dead.
The Titans TV show or the Titans comic?
The Titans television show.
Okay.
Because everything is a web of people who like each other in Hollywood.
Sure.
So Mark and Jeff Johns know each other well. I think Mark recommended me to Jeff Johns. Then I met Jeff,
cool.
and I'd never met Jeff before because I'd never done any work for DC, John. I think at that time I'd done like a one-shot for Marvel by then.
Okay.
I did a one-shot, a Totally Awesome Hulk while I was on Evil Dead. I hadn't done much work over the DC side. But, Jeff and I, we sat down, we had a conversation. He was really great. And he's like, hey, do you want to, work on the show? And I was like, sure, that sounds cool. So I just jumped onto that and started doing that. And it was during Titans that I got the email from Chris Conroy over at DC asking if I was interested in writing a 5-issue arc of Detective.
Cool.
And I was floored by that because, Batman is like the Hamlet of comics. So like,
sure.
Every actor wants to play Hamlet at some point, like anyone who writes comics and says they don't have a Batman story is probably lying, right? Like, we all kind of have our own way of doing the to be or not to be speech. We kind of do it in whispers when no one's looking. But if we could just do that thing, then they'd know Olivier wasn't the only one that could have played the character, right? So, we're all carrying this candle flame of a dream. And, Chris asked me, hey, would you be interested in doing it? And I'm like, you mean like Detective Comics? Or are you guys doing like some other thing called Detective?
This isn't the real Detective Comics.
Like, not the real Detective. You mean like Sandman Mystery Theater or something? Like, because there's like James Tynion,
right,
who's like a legend in comics. And then there's the Postal guy.
Hey, man. Well, you're in good company because that's kind of like Brad Meltzer following Kevin Smith on Green Arrow. And it's like, who would want to follow that kind of run? And you're right. James obviously did. James is doing great in the Batman world. Absolutely. And had a fine run on Detective and everything. You're right. But he's
such a fantastic writer.
Yeah. Well, all right. This is good because I do want to get back to Ash versus Evil Dead and Titans. But while we're on the Detective tangent, yes, let's continue and talk about this this great story that you're doing with Karma and what looks to be the beginnings of The Outsiders. I mean, you can't help but notice with Black Lightning and now Katana showing up at the.
People are. People have their conspiracy theories for sure. My Twitter feed is full of red string connecting to different photographs.
Sure, Markovia being part of the backstory and everything. It's like,
yeah, how about
the only
that?
thing it's missing is the ghost of Jim Aparo showing up and doing a cover for you or something like that.
It's all a coordinated coincidence. I have no idea. About all that. Yeah, well, it started. Chris emailed me and said, "Hey, 5 issues of Detective. We'd like Black Lightning to feature prominently in the arc.
Cool.
Beyond that, we don't really have any rules.
Interesting. Oh, really? Literally just it has to involve Black Lightning.
Yeah, just like, can you would you incorporate Black Lightning into the thing? And cool. we're looking to kind of reinvigorate interest around that character. Oh, yeah. We think having him work with Batman would be really interesting because of their history and kind of the annals of the fiction.
Yeah.
So I talked to Scott Snyder on the phone, who I knew a little bit because Scott and I were on a panel when I had another Image book I wrote called Romulus. That was a 4-issue kind of miniseries that I'd put through Image, and so.
Okay. Yes, I'm nodding. I certainly remember the title. Go on.
Yeah. I sat in a panel with Scott. That the year that came out, and he was super friendly. I mean, Scott, like he's like dude. Everybody's big brother, man. Yeah. He's just such a good dude, solid dude.
Yep.
So I told him, I said to Scott, James has done such good work with the largesse of this world, with these multiple Bat family characters, with these introductions of metaphysics and powerful sci-fi elements and all of this stuff. I don't want to just chase what James was doing.
Sure.
What I'd like to do is almost create like an emotional kind of addendum to what's going on with the character and Tom's work, and kind of bring it down a little bit to ground level. I talked to Scott about crime and human consequence, and putting the citizens of Gotham in the center of the story again.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the Batman that I know. Like, when I think of Batman, I think of, the guy in the bat suit that's protecting the innocent people from the horrors that are trying to destroy them. That's like where my mind goes. I'm still wrapped up in the experience I had reading The Dark Knight Returns or, Year One, Arkham Asylum. Like, that's my Batman. Sure. Legends of the Dark Knight Batman. That's my Batman.
Dude, by the way, this absolutely would have been a great Legends of the Dark Knight story. Not that it's not a great detective story.
Oh, thank you.
But no question.
Appreciate that.
Well, yeah, man, that was the beauty of that book. It was like, okay, now let's welcome this creative team, and they're going to kick ass for 4 or 5 issues and tell a great story. Denny O'Neil and I were just talking about, not that he did need another classic Batman story, but Venom, the first, Venom story that obviously led to Bane. But, no, stuff like that, and I can't even remember the British team that did an incredible Batman story, and it wasn't Alan Grant or anybody obvious like that. But that's the thing. I'm like, oh my God. And that's what's great is everybody, would come in and do kind of their take on Batman and Legends of the Dark Knight. And it was terrific. And that's what this story feels like in a very positive way.
Well, yeah. One of the most influential stories on me when I was a kid was The Cult.
Great story. Yes, indeed. Stephen Grant.
Yeah. It was Starlin.
Oh, yes.
I'm dropping in names. Some terrible names.
Me too. All right, because I wasn't sure if it was Stephen Grant, but it was Starlin.
Show notes.
What was that?
We'll tackle that in show notes.
Yes, I'm gonna look it up while we're talking, but that's fine. Keep going. No, keep talking.
So that was just hugely influential. I mean, I still remember the prose from it. I still remember my present reality is not a pretty place. It's a thing of agony and delirium. It's hard to think damn hard, right? That just really spoke to me because it was an experiential way to kind of experience the Batman universe and the character's will and drive and all of that.
By the way, and we're both going to just kick ourselves. Bernie Wrightson, of course.
Of course, Bernie Wrightson. Of course. It's like forgetting Tom Cruise. Who's that guy in Mission Impossible?
Whoever.
The good-looking guy. He's always young.
Too bad he never amounted to anything, the great Bernie Wrightson. Exactly.
Right.
Another sweetheart of a guy. God rest his soul. Absolutely.
Yeah, Bernie was great, man. His work still endures. So I just sort of pitched Scott random ideas. I mean, the great thing about talking to Scott about story is you don't have to bring him fully formed stuff. You can just bring him notions, ideas, moments, images, and he won't tell you what to do, but he'll help pull the best stuff out of you, and he'll say, oh, if you're doing this, well, have you considered, and what would you do with this? He asks a lot of questions, which is great. That's what you want when you're getting feedback from someone, is questions. Because questions, they unearth, maybe things that you don't even know that you wanted to do, but by, through reflection, you realize, ooh, yeah, I want to do that. So he was excited. I got excited. I told Chris, and then I asked him if I could create my own villain. which wasn't really a matter of personal vanity as much as not wanting to have to wrestle with the continuity the villains were in at the time.
Sure. No, and a lot of them are on the chessboard right now in Tom's story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of them are on the chessboard, because we were leading up to the wedding, and I didn't know who was available and who wasn't. And obviously, Tom needs all the space he needs to do what he's doing, right? So I pitched him this idea for this villain. It was this villain named Karma who had this mask/helmet that would allow him to read thoughts, and this idea of him wanting to kind of reframe Batman into the scariest and most legendary aspects of himself by whittling away the world around him,
Kind of in the way that Hunter Zolomon is doing in Flash with Wally and Barry. But yeah, and I love that whole recurring theme that goes through each of your chapters so far, that when he encounters Orphan and Signal and, the like, it's, you're weakening him. He's not, and again, that's kind of the same area that Tom is playing in with Selina and Bruce as well, and that's certainly the argument that Joker gives to Catwoman and says, if he's happy, he may not be the hero that he needs to be.
Well, it's like the inherent contradiction of Bruce Wayne, this idea that he is a man, but simultaneously wishes to be more than a man, and those two things don't live well inside of a life. You almost have to choose to dedicate yourself to one or the other. And I just go back to criminals are a cowardly and superstitious lot. I shall become a bat, and thinking about, okay, but if you're the creature of fear, what happens to that fear when you start sharing your legacy with other people, especially younger people?
Yep.
And what happens when Gotham starts to see you as, oh, well, you're not, the Batman isn't legend. The Batman's just a guy.
Yep.
Well, if he's just a guy, we can kill a guy. And I wanted to sort of, kind of put all that in stark relief with a character that would threaten Bruce by not only threatening the people he cares about, but threatening the innocent people in the city as well, and kind of forcing him to step into that role of Gotham Guardian, again. And in the back of my mind was always, well, he's dealing with what Tom is doing in Batman. They are the same character. This is happening simultaneously. So I also wanted to put a little touch of what Tom was doing with Batman into my arc, but do that in a more like kind of high concept, high stakes, action thriller landscape. Because Tom's kind of character stories are so good that I didn't feel like I wanted to kind of double up on that beat.
Well, and it's a slower burn. I mean, it's a 100 issue story
100 issues,
compared
right?
to your 5 issues.
Sure.
Certainly, absolutely.
Sure. And Tom was really supportive of it as well. I mean, he and I both enjoy delving into psychology behind things.
Sure.
So we have a real kinship there. And everyone in the Bat office, all the Bat writers, Tynion was incredibly supportive. He's like, yeah, man, that sounds cool. Just go ahead and do your thing.
Excellent.
So it was a relatively smooth process getting from initial ideas outlined to actually starting the script and getting the books out there. Very
cool. Now, let me ask about Karma, because his helmet, which seems to be, the key to his powers, it's given to him kind of in almost a weapons sort of little deal with this Markovian woman who are we gonna learn in this arc the source of the helmet and where it comes from, or is that a story to be told in another time?
You're going to get the pertinent information by the end of the story for sure.
Okay. We got one chapter to go. As
there's still there's still layers, right? So one of the things I wanted to do was kind of introduce this idea of a arms market for radical technology that exists in the world, right? To kind of create this kind of landscape of alien tech that's just left. Because I thought to myself, well, all of these battles happen, all of these things take place in comics, and there's all this detritus that's just left in the wake of everything.
Talk to me. Define detritus. I have never heard that word. That's awesome.
Oh, it's like, like the remnants, the discarded bits and pieces,
Okay.
right? Like the kind of junk landscape, right?
That's like
word
balloon word of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Detritus. I like that. That's fantastic, Brian. Go on.
so you have all of these things are there, and like, well, what if people are gathering those things and kind of reselling them and sort of figuring them out? And that seems like a problem that is worth it. A friend of mine is a police officer, and a really dedicated one, and he talks to me a lot about the difference between fighting criminals and fighting crime. And he says, well, if someone has a gun and they want to use it, and I stop them from using it, at that moment I fought a criminal. Mm-hmm. But I haven't fought crime until I figure out how that gun got into their hands.
Get to the source, yeah.
To the source, right? Like, what are the circumstances that gave this person this illegal firearm, assuming they had the firearm illegally? And that's sort of what I wanted Karma to be, was the sort of tip of the iceberg of a larger problem that the heroes of the DCU might need to address in future stories.
Okay. Wow. Nice. That's excellent, man. No, and I think that's a great theme. And, okay, that's interesting. And it's interesting, too, that you let slip that it's alien tech necessarily, because who's to say, Yeah.
Well, that's in I think, issue 2.
Oh, shame on me. I glossed over that fact that it's an alien.
There's a 9-panel grid, and the arms dealer says, I might not know where it come.
Right.
Perhaps alien.
Oh, that's
Maybe you try kill a Superman?
Yes. Okay, yeah. I did see that scene, and I wasn't paying attention. Okay, very
well. I'm a huge Ian Fleming fan, so anytime I can put touches of James Bond in something, like, you're definitely going to get a touch of James Bond.
Sure.
Like, I've got a scene where Bruce is thinking, trying to jog his memory to figure out where does this man Karma come from.
Yes.
And he's driving this Ferrari on the cliffs, and that's my kind of James Bondian moment for Bruce Wayne. So I like to work the intrigue in. I like the intrigue and the mystery and all of that, along with the traditional, superhero, supervillain kind of fisticuffs.
Sure.
Sort of weaving all those things together.
Well, you're achieving it, man, because honestly, I think it is a good, like you said, it's a high-action story, but there's a lot of character in there as well, and there is, like you just described and everything, a very introspective moment for Bruce kind of figuring it out. I love Jeff Pierce's role of kind of protector and teacher and kind of, watching out for, in particular, for people who haven't been reading the story, three of Bruce's, sidekicks, and it's Barbara, it's Orphan, the former Cassandra Cain Batgirl, and of course Signal as well, and it's great, and I love one of my favorite moments of your story is especially Barbara going to Jeff and being like, hey, this is how he's like, you're here to be protected. You're not supposed to be in the field. I'm here to watch out for you three. And she's like, yeah. That's Bruce's, test.
Sure,
and it's like,
you
got to know when to break the rules. That's when Bruce accepts you as being part of the family. Because, she's seen this before. And that's what I kind of like.
That's the fun.
They all represent different levels of being there for Batman over the years. And even in, thank God, with Rebirth, there's still a lot of Oracle in Barbara. And I even love that you've one of the panels. Who's your artist? Forgive me.
Oh, it's Miguel Mendonça for the first 2, and then Felipe Briones for the middle 2, and then Miguel for the final issue.
Okay, well they're both doing a great job. But I love that.
Yeah, even there's that really good stuff.
Yeah, there's that one panel of Barbara sitting in a very Oracle sort of way.
Oh yeah, when she's researching and then sitting by the computer.
Yep.
Well, that's an intentional nod towards her oracleness.
I figured as much.
Which I love.
Yeah.
When I was reading it.
Well, that was the fear.
That aspect of her character.
Yeah, that was
interesting.
I think that was the fear bringing her back to Batgirl. I get it, and we all get it. But by the same token, man, she evolved into such a much more interesting character as Oracle while she was disabled. And it's like I said, I get that why she needs to be Batgirl, and she's the most recognizable Batgirl, and that I'm glad they're keeping that element of certain writers are, and clearly you're one of them.
Yeah, you know that. Well, it's an important role on an action squad.
Yeah.
You know, to be able to have like, real time, you know, kind of eye in the sky research.
Yep.
It's like super important. And it's fun to write Barbara because she is so spunky and so headstrong, and to put her in a situation with Jeff, and you know, and Jeff Pierce, he thinks everyone in Gotham is crazy. Like he's like, you're all crazy people, you know. Like, wait a minute. You mean none of you can shoot anything out of your hands?
No, he's great.
Like, none of you? You know? Like, so I really wanted to have him have this outside looking in perspective. Like, okay, one, I'm still trying to deal with the fact that Bruce Wayne is Batman, which he realizes over the course of the arc, and is like, okay, I need time with that just to put that together. But, you know, he's seeing like young people that are put in these high stress situations, and everyone seems intimate and comfortable with this level of violence. And he's really just trying to play the game the way that Batman wanted him to play it. But Barbara is also like, well, you know, this is Gotham, so you got to catch up, man.
Right.
Like, Bruce says a lot of stuff.
Right. And you got to know when he's just kind of talking and when he, you know, when he means what he says. No, I'm with you. And also, like you said, I love Jeff's fish out of water perspective of, I don't understand why you need me for this. And, you know, whatever. And yeah, when he does kind of, you know, realize that Batman is Bruce and Bruce reveals himself to him and everything. And it's just like, all right. Like you said, I got to catch up, so I'll do my best.
I got to deal with it. Well, you know, and I see Jefferson Pierce as a character who is deciding what he wants to become. I mean, you know, Batman is finished for all intents and purposes, right? Like he sort of realized his thing, his mission, Batsuit, the whole thing. Yeah. Superman, you know, Jefferson is Black Lightning, but I think he's still evolving. I think he's at a point in his life where he has to decide, am I going to be a more local character, or am I going to try to become one of those kind of new pantheon characters of the Justice League?
Yep.
Right? Like, do I think that in my future I'll look at Diana Prince and see equal
I'm
there?
with you.
Right?
Absolutely,
I have that stature. Right? Is that my future? I don't really know. So Bruce sees that, I think, in him, sees a guy that's trying to figure out what his path is going to be. And in the story now, we have Jefferson in Metropolis. That's where he's from. That's where he's working out of.
Yeah.
So
and I don't even know if they even specify that it's Suicide Slum anymore. Forgive me, that's the 70s reader in me.
Yeah. It's the same area. I don't know if it has the same moniker, right? Things change over time. But you know, when you're in a city with Superman, it's easy to kind of lose your part in this whole game, because you're in a city with one of the most powerful superheroes ever. Yeah. You know, so Batman sees a lot of potential in Jefferson, and I think he in my mind, when Batman's world starts to tremble, he likes to find places where he can exert control, where he feels like, okay, well, this is terra firma for me. And I saw the story kind of a reflection of what Tom was doing. Like, while his personal life is going through this turmoil, I think he's like, I need to find a situation where I know what's going to go on, right? Where I can predict what will happen, where I can sculpt and I can mold, because that is, I think, part of his nature. Bruce's nature is to try to sculpt and mold people and try to lead people towards what he thinks their best potential is. And that relationship between him and Jefferson's really interesting to me. I'm having a lot of fun kind of playing around with that and exploring that.
Good conversations, absolutely. Again, I'm a huge Black Lightning fan, and I love the television show. And it really, all it did was reinforce that original Tony Isabella, Trevor Von Eden run for me. Because again, it really was, man. It was really one of my favorite late 70s books, and I was really happy when he made it to The Outsiders. But I missed his solo stories. And would you say then, so he is obviously a younger Black Lightning in the comics, obviously, because there really is this Dark Knight Returns vibe in the TV show.
In the TV show, yeah, he's a veteran. He's like a veteran returning to form.
Yeah, and it really, I mean, God, especially in those early episodes where he's feeling every sore moment of being back in action and stuff, and he's, this middle-aged guy that's like, oh man, this ain't like what it was when I was in my 20s.
Right, it's gonna take a. It's like me when I tried to start drinking again, and I was like, ooh. It's going to take me a week to recover from last night.
Exactly. Oh. I'm with you. That's hilarious. But yeah, so it's great. And I do like that they are, again, and I guess with the benefits of Rebirth, it is kind of a reintroduction of this relationship between Bruce and Jeff. And I loved also early on Martian Manhunter even acknowledging Jefferson's potential and everything and being like, well, obviously, yeah, the League knows how good he is. And, we want him to. And that was a great scene. I liked how you were able to, as opposed to initially, like he even says at the beginning, I called for Superman. And it's like, yeah, Bruce, I can handle this. What do you need?
Well, you need a good Bruce jerk moment in the first book, right? You just need one of those, like, I called Clark. Like, there's just no. It's just not a Batman story unless I get one good scene where Bruce is kind of being a jerk.
Yeah.
It's super important, right?
Absolutely.
And it's like it's really a story, yes, about Bruce dealing with this villain who wants to peel away everything he thinks that makes Batman weaker, but simultaneously it's about Bruce seeing that the people he cares for might be in good hands working with someone else, and that he is a good mentor, but he's not a teacher. He doesn't have a bedside manner, and he knows it. And I think he looks at these people and says, they need someone who can be a little closer to what they're going through and isn't always preaching from the horse saddle, isn't always handing down commandments from the mountain, right? And and Jefferson sees these people as traumatized people. That's his first thought is, oh, well, you guys have all suffered through some bad stuff, and this is why you do this. I work with kids who've gone through some bad stuff. Now, you guys aren't children, but I think the first thing he sees is the questions, like, are you balanced? Are you happy? Like, what's going on with you guys? And that dynamic, I think, makes that sort of kettle a really interesting brew of stuff.
Tell me your opinion of Duke. We've talked about Barbara. We should talk about Duke and Orphan as well.
Yeah, well, I have a pretty bad thing happen to Duke in the first issue of the arc. He gets blown out of a window.
By saving that kid who loves Batman. Yeah, trying to save that kid.
And Duke. I don't think Duke yet fully understands the life he's chosen for himself. I think he has more scars to collect and more bruises that need to heal. So with him, I wanted him to live in a place of consequence, and he comes sort of back into the story in the final issue of the story. He has some moments there.
Cool.
But I think for me, heroes always get put through a crucible. I'm a mythologist, John. Like I firmly believe in the Campbellian monomyth. In that hero's journey, that structure, that the hero that suffers and overcomes and goes through all of that. So with Duke, it was important to me to kind of give him kind of a serious knock. I mean, in a lot of ways, Karma is kind of the first of his rogues gallery, right? Like, you could interpret it that way.
Sure, definitely.
And Duke could see that guy like, well, this is the guy that he hurt me. This is mine. This one, and again, I only have 5 issues for this story, but there's stuff definitely to play with, I think, in the future. And one of the things that I like to do when I'm coming in and working on continuity is leave the house in an interesting place for the next guy.
I'm with you. No, that's great.
Like, so that's what I think could be an interesting journey for him to sort of deal with the consequence of what happened, how he has to get past, whatever fears might be there, kind of find his confidence again. And realize, like, okay, I'm on that Dick Grayson path. I'm on that Bruce Wayne path. And how are they living their lives? Because I can look at Dick and I can see my near future. I can look at Bruce and I can see my far future. Or maybe I can look at, Jason's gravestone.
Well, or Jason, Jason with the Joker, right. and Dick with right. Dick with Harvey Dent. Darby always called him the boy hostage, and I know that was right. always an interesting little nugget for Nightwing writers to play with when Nightwing would face Two-Face, and the same thing with Jason and the Joker and stuff. And it's like, we got unresolved business, and certainly after being resurrected and being read and stuff. So would you say then that Orphan is obviously that kind of middle ground sidekick who has seen more miles than Duke has, but not as many obviously as Barbara?
Well, yeah, I think Orphan is almost like limitless potential, as a character. Cassandra Cain means a lot to me. I remember reading, I think it was Silent Night, that was Damian Scott and Kelly Puckett's work in the 90s. Mm-hmm. Or not, was it the 90s? I think it was, it might have, actually, you're right. Maybe it was early 2000s at that point. Could have been like late 90s or early aughts. Yeah, because it was around No Man's Land time around, right? Yeah, around No Man's Land time. And, I'm a firm believer in redemption. I'm a firm believer in nurture over nature. And she's a nurture over nature character. She's a character that comes from circumstances where she was meant to be something else and had to figure out her own path. Mm-hmm. What do I do with the power that was given me, even though the power that was given me was given to me for bad reasons? Yeah. And all that really appeals to me. So, for Cassandra, it's a journey of her kind of figuring out, okay, I think I'm no longer afraid of becoming the bad me. Right. I think after James's work with her, all the business he'd been doing and the good storytelling he'd been doing, her relationship with Clayface and all that, I think Cassandra has put some of those fears behind. And now she's thinking of, okay, well, who am I? Because I don't want to be Barbara. Not that I dislike Barbara, but Barbara isn't me. And I can't be Bruce. So all of these characters, John, are in these kind of really interesting place because they're all sort of forming still. It's not a group of veterans. Like when you put, Black Lightning, Cassandra, the Signal, they're all these aren't characters who have done their trilogy already and now they've sort of settled into their TV spinoff. Right. No, I'm totally with you. Yeah. Like they're, they can still grow and evolve in really interesting ways, and that's what makes it electric for me as a writer when I'm kind of writing these interactions and thinking about where we can go. That's awesome, man, and I'm psyched. We got one chapter left, and it's coming out in just a couple days as we drop this episode. So, and I just want to thank I've gotten so much just positive energy from Batman fans. People that had never heard of me before I wrote Detective, or some of them may have heard of me, but being the new guy coming in after someone like James, who done work that really mattered for people, I was very worried about, I hope I don't anger all the Batman fans out here because I'm doing this kind of stark and a little dark and whatever. And people have been so welcoming, the Bat readership is a very unique thing. We all love this world and we love this character. And I just want to thank everyone who's gone out and picked up a book and sent me a note online and shared that book with other people. I really appreciate it. It's been a fantastic experience. Good to hear. And also, obviously loving Tom's story. That's why he comes back on Word Balloon every couple months to talk about it and check in. But I also am glad that unlike when, and I don't mean to pick on past regimes and the decisions they made, but when Superman was in Straczynski's hands and he was walking across America, it was tough to write other Superman stories, it seemed. And the same thing with Batman, and Wonder Woman was off limits because again it was in Straczynski's hands as well. And while Tom is telling his epic story, you're coming in with this fast action, interesting story with a good villain and a straight up cool street Gotham story that also has these other actors in it,
but it's still, obviously still very much a Batman story. And yeah, I think it's a great contrast in the best way of, okay, while you're enjoying the slow burn that Tom's doing, here's a good fast-paced 5-issue story that Bryan's doing. And that's terrific, man. And again, I'm glad that you're getting that response, because like I said, back in the Legends of the Dark Knight days, that was always the great thing about that, was you'd always just get, all right, we're in for 4 or 5 issues, we're out, here comes the next team and everything. Have they announced who's following you on Detective?
I believe James Robinson is following up with a Two-Face story that will be awesome, because James is awesome.
And James is always interesting when he tells Two-Face stories, so yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. Two-Face is like my favorite villain, so
I understand, and he's one of my favorites as well. And I was just saying I think it was with Denny, and I don't mean to keep name dropping people, but that moment of clarity in Batman and Robin, the Val Kilmer movie, and it's really the only great moment where Tommy Lee Jones is allowed to act for a second and not just be over the top, and he's Harvey for a second. And I love that. I mean, and again, going back to James's old, the face-to-face story arc that he did, where Batman trusted Two-Face enough in terms of, look, I got to be away. I need you to watch Gotham for me. And I know you're in there, Harvey. I know you can do this. And it is that great. And also in Dark Knight Returns as well. That's like that second issue. Is it maybe it's the first issue. Is it the first issue where he again, where Harvey's face is fixed? No, it's got to be the first.
Yeah, I think Harvey's face is fixed in the first, but I think he confronts Harvey in the second.
Okay, and just that conversation again, because with Batman, it's always the villains that he regrets, and again, it's just like Lex and Clark when it's allowed to be that they knew each other in Smallville, and it's like, oh, we used to be friends, we used to and especially with Harvey and Bruce, it's like, no, we used to work together, man. I know there's a good guy in there somewhere, Harvey, and that's the thing. He's not fooled by it, but it's just I know it's a regret, in the same way that Jason's death is a regret that he'll never erase, and that's what I think makes Bruce interesting. And again, it's these kind of characters that can, at least that's my point of view as far as Two-Face goes. What's your point of view on Two-Face?
Well, I agree with all of that, John. I mean, all the Bat villains represent an aspect of Batman, and Two-Face is literally the war between order and chaos inside of one guy.
Yep.
It's a sudden bifurcation of self, right? Batman himself, Bruce Wayne, had a slow and controlled bifurcation, but Harvey, it all happened at once.
Yep.
And it all happened in adulthood, and I think Bruce can identify with that element of the psychosis, and certainly he feels responsible for the circumstances that created Harvey. And there is a good man in there somewhere, and I think it's important for Bruce to believe that part of Harvey is there and can be saved. I think it matters to him.
Yeah.
He can't just file him away with the Joker and the Riddler and Mr. Zsasz and all of that.
Yeah. Like Dark Knight Returns, when he says, "Have a good look, Batman. See what I really am," and he's like, "I see a reflection, Harvey." And that's the thing, is he's the dark side of what could happen when you're faced with that kind of trauma.
Yeah. It's a good fable about kind of what extreme experience can create in the individual, and how trauma manifests in different ways for different people, and so
you could say that about karma as well, obviously.
Right. And I was thinking a bit about Dent when I was coming up with karma and coming up with his details, and I think in the third issue we see that Karma was a gun runner, and Batman hit him with a kind of watered down version of Jonathan Crane's fear gas.
Yep, that was great.
And sort of left him there, and
the bats picked him apart. Gross.
The Barons of Markovia, when the bats came for him, and people online gave me a little bit of trouble. They're like, "Man, that's a really savage thing for Batman to do." And I was thinking, yes, but it's also a little bit in Batman's past. Like, we don't know when that was happening. We don't know the circumstances that led up to it. And a moment of extremity is all it takes.
Agreed.
That's it.
Agreed. And I also think that unlike Superman and that Man of Steel reaction that a lot of us had, and I'll admit I'm one of them as well, Although again,
Sure.
it was in his past, as Jerry Ordway reminded me recently. But no, I think you're right, and again, you can only look to things like Dark Knight Returns, where it's like, no, Batman can get pretty cold when he needs to and when he wants to, and again,
Frank
he didn't
Miller...
even realize the consequences of his actions. So you can say that, yeah, maybe an older Batman probably wouldn't have done that, but then again, I thought it was consistent.
Well, yeah. I mean, the combination of the fear toxin and the transmitter that would bring the bats to the target, I look at it like, well, maybe the bats got a whiff of that fear toxin.
Good call. Sure.
And maybe they were a little crazed, I mean, animals have their own kind of psychology, so maybe it just got a little out of hand. And there's probably a reason why we haven't seen Batman return to that gas.
Very good. Yeah, man.
Probably a reason why even the Man of Fear decided, yeah, that might be too much,
I like it.
For me. And I love the idea of consequence. I love the idea of choices you make kind of coming back to haunt you in the present. And how do you keep those choices from destroying your future and all of that? And karma is kinetic, confident, violent, intense, but also kind of tragically pathetic in a lot of ways. Sure. He needs the animus with Batman because he refuses to believe that the person that left him there in Markovia all those years ago is just a guy that could have people that cares about him and takes care of the city. Like, in order to buoy his own sense of self and greatness, he needs his enemy to be something way more than that, something way more than a man. And he refuses to say, well, this relatable human being in a bat suit, found me and broke me. No, I was broken by a legend. I was broken by a Leviathan that came out of the dark, and I will accept no substitute. And I must transform you back into what you were, because that is what I deserve as a nemesis, and
yeah. No, I get that. And also, by the same token, his name is Karma, and it's as Batman realizes, I created this. It's my problem.
Yeah, and Karma, in one of he's a very mellifluous individual, this guy, right? He's a guy that you just want to punch him in the face and tell him to shut up. That's intentional.
Yeah.
So, but in that, he does talk about how I got what I deserved, right? And so that sense of justice, that sense of karma, with the little K, is where he's finding his identity.
Yep.
Because after something horrible happens to us, that transforms us in a permanent way, that will alter, every moment we have from that point, we got to figure out what we're all about, right? You've got to figure out what the meaning of your existence is, what your life is, because it can't be what it was before. If he was a gun runner that was making money doing horrible things to people, but then he would take the money and spend it in the French Riviera, well, you can't do that anymore because now you've got face problems, right? So all of that, like summers off, winters on kind of mercenary life you had, that's over. What do you do? And I think he just sat in a place and thought about deserving and who deserves what and why did he deserve this? And maybe he'll be that force in the world, not a hero or even an anti-hero, but literally he sees himself as a force that gives people what they deserve. And the first person he wants to kind of visit with that notion is Batman himself.
Good story, man. Absolutely. And looking forward to this last chapter. And I really like the various elements of the Batman mythos that you're able to throw in. Because again, we're part of the story. And I think you explain it well enough too for a newbie. As far as, as Bruce was kind of figuring everything out, bringing back Markovia, bringing back the League of Assassins, and just everything that Jonathan Crane's gas. I think these are all great elements, and again, I think you've created a very, very cool, fast action story that there's a lot of character in there as well, and good interplay. And like I said, I you don't have to confirm or deny it, but it just seems to me that there are just too many outsiders elements in this story that something isn't going on, and I have a feeling we might hear an announcement in the months to come. And if you're involved, that
I hear there's there's these similarities between this and this thing called The Outsiders. That's what they tell me, that there's a thing. I don't know. I
There you
mean,
go.
we'll see.
All right.
I guess you got to ask Dan DiDio about that or something. Maybe he knows what they're talking
Yeah,
about. I mean,
no
I write
idea.
everything inside,
All right.
so I don't know why everyone says outside. I do all of my writing inside. You know, that's what I do.
Now I'm killing myself that I didn't read, and I will. And for our next conversation, which I hope there will be in the future, we'll talk about
Sure.
Black Lightning and Hong Kong Phooey, because I bought it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
For sure.
No, and I'm hoping. Tell me at least this much without spoiling. Is it set in the 70s?
Oh, for sure.
Excellent, fantastic. I mean, I saw
Has to be.
I saw the big hair on the cover, so I assumed this.
Oh, it's got to be.
Okay, yeah, you're damn right it does. Absolutely. I love. Hey, man, again, I loved them both in the 70s. And I keep saying this. This is a recurring theme. I was talking to Steve Orlando last night because he did the Martian Manhunter and Marvin the Martian. All those Hanna-Barbera things exceeded expectations. And I'm looking forward to reading your story because really, when I heard it, I'm like, all right, whatever. I'm sure that'll be cute. And and then I read them, the ones I've read, and I'm just like, oh my god, these are fantastic. Tom's was great. Humphreys did a great job with the Legion of Bugs Bunny, and you know, I mean, again, Orlando did a great job with Marvin and John. I think it's great, and yeah, once I saw that it was Black Lightning and Hong Kong Phooey, I grabbed it immediately, and then reading your story, I'm like, oh wait a minute, Bryan wrote that, didn't he? God damn it! And I didn't have time to read it before we talked. And I'm like, oh, all right, we'll talk.
Well,
about
that was
it
a really funny thing. Like, so I've been working with Marie Javins on Michael Cray, which is the Wildstorm.
Yes, and I wanted to ask about that.
Spinoff.
Go on.
So, you know, Marie and I have been working on that. It was always going to be a 12-issue thing. So, you know, we've been kind of going back and forth working on that. And Marie was also editing a lot of these crossovers, or at least like kind of gathering them.
Okay.
And I'd missed the first round, but I asked her, like, what's up with Hong Kong Phooey? And she looked at me and she's like, that was the most radioactive of them all, right? Like, because you know, there's a little kitsch there, some cultural kitsch with him and the kung fu and the rest of it, and a lot of potential landmines to step in the age of Twitter that we have, right? Yeah. And I was like, yeah, but no, we got to lean into all that. Like, trust me, I know what I'm doing. It's going to be cool. No one's going to get mad. It's going to be awesome. We're going to, like, John Carpenter, Big Trouble in Little China this thing. It's going to be fantastic.
Excellent. Very cool.
So she's like, all right, well, that's insane, but I'll put it in my back pocket and we'll see. And then, like months later, Jim Chadwick emails me. He's like, hey, man, you still want to do that Hong Kong Phooey Black Lightning thing?
That's
and I'm like, yeah, you bet. So I met with Dan about it, and I turned in something, and he's like, you know, Bryan, this just isn't absurd enough. And I was playing it a little careful because I didn't, you know, I hadn't had a lot of conversation with Dan at the time. But when I met with him in his office, he had a kung fu movie playing in his office, cool. Like some deep cut Shaw Brothers thing I'd never seen before.
Gotcha.
And we just started, you know, kind of just talking about like jive turkeys and suckers for a second. And I was like, oh, Dan's family. Okay, I'll give him the real story. So then I went back and like retooled it and like put the ideas in that I wanted to put in there and gave it to him. And he liked it. And Dennis Cowan came in to do the art with Bill Sienkiewicz, which is incredible. Yeah. Like for a guy that reads Elektra Assassin probably once a month.
That's great. Who
studies Cowan's work on The Question.
Loved
often.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes, indeed.
To be able to say that you wrote something and you got to work with both Bill Sienkiewicz and Dennis Cowan is insane. Like, that's like an insane thing. That's like getting, you know, De Niro and Pacino in your movie, but you're not Michael Mann. You're just some guy.
I'm with you.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're just some dude directing a movie and legends, right? So it was a lot of fun. It's very 70s. It's very kung fu film. You know, it's a little touch of Tarantino in there, most likely. But yeah, it was a really, really fun ride.
Bryan, isn't it great? It's truly, now, and forgive me, but I am going to break it down that it's a white guy and a black guy talking about Asian culture. But wasn't it wonderful being young and that all of us really loved the kung fu world of the 70s and the Shaw Brothers? And I mean, honestly, I appreciate everyone standing up and representing for their culture. And I think that that's important. I genuinely, and again, I'm sure I sound condescending when I say this, but I also miss I talked about this with Reggie Hudlin regarding Power Man and Iron Fist, and it's like, and also too Sanford Green as well when he was drawing it with Dave Walker, and it's like, isn't it great that like when that book came out, these were just guys that genuinely loved each other, and it was like fine, and they were in the midst of this kind of again martial arts culture, and it was just like, hey, we all thought it was cool. Nobody was trying to rip off Bruce Lee per se. Well, I guess maybe the producers might have been. Maybe
Sure.
some of the
well,
producers.
A lot of it is, there are so many forces out there right now that want to convince us that other people mean us harm, and there's an economy built around selling that idea to people, we don't trust intention anymore. We always assume that a person did something and their intentions had to be nefarious in some way. Like, we start off viewing each other as villains, and then we have to prove to each other that we're not villains. And that's creating a lot of strife and acrimony that I don't think is particularly helpful, and obviously, I'm black, so I certainly don't want anyone to feel like they can't do a thing because of, what race they are, religion, creed, gender, what have you, for certain. Yeah. And I'm certainly not a fan of discrimination or exploitation in that way. But, simultaneously, I do worry a bit that we ascribe the worst of intentions to every action, and we tend to judge people based on the worst thing that they've said or done. And we can't have a society that functions properly if we just assume villainy all of the time, and we didn't used to do that. Yeah. It used to be you could sort of take things, prima facie as what it is without being so concerned about the machinations behind the thing. And do you mean this? You mean that? It's funny, like, you're watching a movie like Blazing Saddles or something. You can't even write that script now.
Hell yeah. Absolutely.
Right? Like, if you write Blazing Saddles now, you will get run out of Hollywood.
Well, have you,
right?
As being someone in the television world, I'm sure you're aware that they're talking about rebooting All in the Family, and I'm like, good fucking luck. And even though that Norman Lear's doing it, it's like, good luck. I mean, that show is incredible in its frankness and its audacity, and yes, some people read it wrong. But I think most of us read it right, and it's a shame. I just think, again, and forgive the editorial, everybody. We'll get off it soon. But yeah, I just think it is. It's just, you're right. I agree, and totally. Blazing Saddles is a classic example of that.
Well, I have a Vertigo book coming out this fall. I think it's is it October, November? It might be November. It's called American Carnage.
Okay.
And it's part of the 25th anniversary of Vertigo, this line of books that's coming out, and the elevator pitch is it's about a half-black FBI agent who can pass for white that goes undercover into white supremacist organizations in California to find the possible murderer of an FBI agent. And it's really a story about how a person goes into a situation thinking he's going to find one thing and then sees like all these different sort of strata and ambitions and interpersonal conflicts and dimensionalized people, and I call it like white supremacist Game of Thrones, right? So, okay. But that's a book where I talk to Andy Curry all the time. He's my editor on the book, okay. And I'm like, they might yell at you about this book, Andy. And I'm like, it's gonna be okay. But that's like one of those projects, right, where because I am a black man writing that story, I think people will sort of read it in a different way, right? They'll read it like, well, he's obviously not one of these guys. Sure. But I do worry we're in a world where if a white person were to write that story, you might wonder if he believed what the antagonist believed, right? Sure. Like, and that's a dangerous place to be, And I do believe that most people are good. I do think that we don't want to hate each other and hurt each other. I did 2 years of research talking to white supremacists for that comic book. And wow. The interesting thing that happened, John, is at first you would get the bullet points, the pamphlets, sure, Turner Diaries, sure, what have you, the 14 words, all that. And once they saw that they couldn't trigger you with a slur, that you weren't trying to set them up, that you were just trying to listen to find out how they got to the place they are right now, you could see the hate start to fall away. I'm not saying I converted anybody or had anyone leave a movement. That certainly didn't happen. But I would see people catching themselves just talking to me and then realizing that they had to put on their airs again.
Understood.
Right?
Yeah.
And then that's when you realize, like, oh, there's daylight here. There's a little daylight. I mean, not everyone. Some people, like, just, but with a lot of people, it's like, oh, there's a little daylight here. Yeah, like there's a thing. And so, yeah, it's I just for people that are out there, kind of dealing with the climate as it is, let's not confuse comfort with safety. They are not the same thing. We should have a society where the most people possible are safe, but I do not think we need a society where the most people possible are comfortable.
I like it. All right, I get it. Now I have to ask you, obviously, and I had no idea that the story was coming. What were you like? Oh, son of a bitch! That Spike is doing Black Klansman at the same time, or
no, not at all. Actually, because Black Klansman is set in the 70s,
True.
I believe.
Yes, it is.
So it's like the 70s, and it's the South, and it's David Duke, Louisiana, and it's based on a true story.
Yeah, you're right.
All of that stuff. Like what I'm doing is now, and I really wanted to do this story in a blue state, right? I didn't
Good point.
because I feel like. There's so many stories that happen in the Midwest and happen in the South and the whole thing, Mason-Dixon and all that. I really wanted to deal with something that was more in like a blue state because California has a lot of different kind of aspects to it, and it's unexplored in that way. And this idea that this liberal bastion of just permanent blue, and that's just not true at all. So if anything, I guess if my book was coming out like this Wednesday, I'd be a little irritated, but because Spike's movie is hitting earlier, he's starting a conversation with that movie that can dovetail directly into the work that I'm doing in the comic book. So,
no, I get it. That's great.
It's funny. I didn't really know about the movie until I was like done with like the second issue of the script, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, right on. Like that'll facilitate things. It's not the kind of concept like an asteroid is going to crash into Earth. What do we do? Right? We're not in like a deep impact Armageddon situation.
Yes, indeed. Isn't that funny? We're making just the same thing right across the street. All right.
Yeah, it's not quite that kind of thing.
You.
So
that's great. No, and you're right. Good Lord. I really wasn't going to watch OJ Made in America because I'm like, hey man, I was working in sports.
Do you want to go through that again?
Well, and again, I still haven't watched the FX dramatization, The People versus OJ, but I did watch Made in America, and again, it was for the same. And it's going to sound ridiculous because of the comparison, but it was the same thing when the movie Moneyball came out, where I'm like, I was working in sports radio, and we were dealing with OJ as it was happening. We dealt with Moneyball as it was happening. Right. And I'm like, I don't need to see even a documentary. I remember. And then, as you say, California is, despite it being a blue state, it's not one unified frame of mind. And I think Made in America really made that point very clearly. And I thought, that sounds ambitious and really cool. And I'm glad you're exploring that.
Well, it's a cool crime story, John. Like I was talking to Mark Doyle over at Vertigo about how my Vertigo was scalped.
Amen.
100 bullets.
Yes.
Like, that was my Vertigo, right? Everyone has their own Vertigo. I mean, I love Sandman and Neil Gaiman's a genius and all of that, for sure. And I was a huge fan of Hellblazer. John Constantine is one of my favorite characters. So, like, I did love all of that visionary kind of magical realism work that was being done. But for me, like 100 Bullets and Scalped, like, those books are revelations for me. That those were things that really mattered. And I tell people that American Carnage isn't a book about politics. I mean, there's some political stuff in the book because of the milieu of the book, for sure. But it's really a crime story. It's about power and ambition. You have a character who is lost in the beginning of this story, who has a very particular talent to be able to get close to people, to get people to trust him. And he goes into a situation where he might find the kind of power in that situation that he can't find in the quote unquote normal world. And how does that affect him? And how does he move through that, and where his alliances remain, right? And it questions the idea of biological identity. Is philosophical identity more important because that's the identity you choose?
Sure.
And all of that stuff, like that's the thing. And someone was yelling at me, or not yelling at me, but someone like tweeted at me, and they were like, "Well, is this like a diatribe against all like Trump voters?" And I was like, "No, it's got white supremacists in it. I don't think they're all white supremacists." It's like unless you're a white supremacist, you'll probably enjoy the narrative, and if you are, you still might. You know what I mean? Like it's like people are so ready for something to come out and be attacking them.
Yes, is this
that
about
I have to
me?
calm a few people down. Yeah, and be like, "No, I'm not attacking anybody. This is a crime story. Like I can't, the Italian mob is played out. Can't do that.
Fair enough. Yes.
I just wanted to find a milieu that was interesting, and Kurt Sutter had gotten to bikers first, so I chose this.
That's cool. You're right, because even as something as harmless as The Big Bang Theory, are you talking about me? And it's like, calm down.
Right.
If you see that in yourself, take a second look in there. That might be more a statement about yourself than the fiction. But yeah, man.
Well, that's why I try to be really positive online. I mean, if anyone follows me on Twitter, I don't get into arguments with people. I don't try to promote the acrimony, and I try as hard as I can to be patient and answer questions honestly and talk to people because I just want to try to kind of stop the culture of escalation that we have as much as I can.
Yeah.
And so if people read something and something stark happens, in the book, and you're like, whoa, like in Detective, in one of the previous issues, a reporter gets set on fire, and you could look at that as, was that misogynist? What's that all about? Well, hopefully, if you just look at me on social media and you see how I interact with people, you realize like, oh, well, he doesn't actually want to set women on fire. This is a bad guy doing bad guy things.
Yeah, I understand, dude. I understand, but again, it's like middle-aged white guy. So I'm wrong. I'm wrong to begin with. And that's okay. That's all right.
It's really it's not as bad as it looks. It's like Nixon talked about his silent majority. I think there's a silent majority of people that are just kind of living their lives, man, and trying to do the best they can out here.
Man. Absolutely. Yes, exactly. I'm just trying to get through the day. Exactly. I agree with you.
You're just trying to get through get through the day.
It's kind of true. I agree. I think that's the majority, man.
The day.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, for real.
So that sounds great, and definitely another reason to come back and have a future conversation about that. But now, again, another book that sadly I'm not reading. I got to be honest, I'm not a Wildstorm guy. I love Sleeper and everything behind Sleeper. But tell me about Michael Cray, because I want to know what I'm missing, and maybe it's funny. Again, talking to Steve Orlando, I wasn't reading the Doom Patrol JLA Milk Wars, and he told me about what was going on, and I'm like, I'm going to be buying Milk Wars, and I will be catching up on that. So tell me about Michael Cray and who is he in the Wildstorm universe? I don't know the name.
Well, so Michael Cray is a character that most people know as Deathblow.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. I do know. I remember the crossover with Batman.
Hired killer, that type of guy, professional assassin, all that. And so Warren wanted to do Michael Cray had appeared in Warren's main Wildstorm title, which is really about it's very Warren, it's about clandestine operations and the control of technology and people killing to keep secrets and all of that stuff, all that great rich Warren Ellis stuff. And Michael Cray was is a character in the Wildstorm universe and had been reinvented a bit in Warren's main Wildstorm run, and he wanted to spin that off into a 12-issue miniseries. Okay. So I hadn't met Warren. I didn't really know him. And I think we might have followed each other on Twitter or something, but I hadn't really had a conversation with him. But Marie knew him well, and I think Marie suggested me to Warren. Warren read Postal and Romulus, cool. I think, and was like, yeah, this guy is interesting. He can do some things there. And so I spoke to Warren about it, and Warren was like, well, I want to have him hunt and kill twisted versions of the Justice League.
Fun.
And I was like, and Dan and Jim know about this. Like, just to make sure.
Different than The Authority?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, different. Yeah,
okay.
like, it's, I mean, because these are actually named as such. Because the Wildstorm doesn't take place in the DC universe. It's a kind of its own universe.
Figured. Yeah, okay.
You get your own Oliver Queen, you get your own, Barry Allen, you get your own Diana Prince, you get your own John Constantine, but they are very similar to their incarnations in the DCU, but they're all sort of twisted, like something went wrong on the way, They were walking the path of righteousness and slipped and fell and landed on the slope of the wicked. So they are these like kind of distorted versions of these characters, and beyond that, Warren was like, yeah, just go ahead and do what you want. So it's a story that I think gets crazier every issue, and it gets crazier because I get more confident every issue. So, when it starts off, you see Michael Cray, assassin, soldier. He has an alien in his head that's trying to take over his life and gives him the power to touch things and make them disintegrate. And he's hunting people because he's been assigned to do that by this clandestine organization run by a woman named Christine Trelane, who promises to help Michael with the affliction in his brain, in his mind, in exchange for hunting and killing these nefarious people around the world. It's sort of like become our agent by coercion is the situation that Michael is in.
Gotcha. Okay.
But as it continues to go on, it just gets nuttier and nuttier, and the first trade just came out, in that you've got evil Green Arrow, evil Barry Allen, evil Aquaman, things like that happening in there. And all of the stories are kind of their own little genres, little mini genres.
Sure.
From traditional sort of superhero type antics to a Lovecraftian kind of horror short story set in a fishing town in New Zealand that believes it's being protected by someone they call the Aquaman.
Very good. Very
right? Good. Like things like that, right? But in the final six, the second half of the story, we get an evil Diana Prince, and I would say an evil John Constantine, but I'll probably just say John Constantine. We get John Constantine after 5 bad days in a row, right?
Okay.
So, and we start to deal with magic and the potential reality of it, and the line between science and magic, and what is really inside of Michael. Is it a consciousness? Is it spirit? Is it alien? What is it? And gets a little almost metaphysical and philosophical, kind of brushes up, dare I say, against some Grant Morrison kind of ideas. And it's just this incredibly nutty, hyper-violent, pulpy but hopefully thoughtful tale about a man with another thing in his mind that has to kill the most powerful people in the world. That's the best way I can describe it.
That sounds great. That sounds very planetary in the best way.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely has those shades.
Yeah, all right, because that's what, like I said, I started with, maybe you're going after the Authority. I'm like, wait a minute, this sounds more like planetary in a good way. So is the first trade, like, is the 12 issues, are they 2 stories that complement each other, or is it one 12-issue story?
It's a one 12-issue story that's been separated, that will be separated into 2 trades. Yeah. It's still in monthlies now. So the last issue, I think the latest issue dropped this Wednesday, 10. So
we're almost done. Okay, wow.
Yeah, you've got 11 and 12. This one doesn't ship bi-monthly, it ships monthly, so we've got a couple more months on it. But the first volume of the first 6 is already out there, so people can go out there and pick up that trade if they're curious about it. And I would suggest starting with the first issue.
Well, sure.
Because, you kind of – everything – I layer a lot as a writer. So you'll get more out of it if you start from the beginning. Like if you like what I'm saying about Detective and you're listening to this, track down 983 and start there, because you're gonna get more out of it. If you
absolutely, no question. Yeah.
And
and
so
okay, well,
that's
and that's
great.
Good. Well, and also I understand, and certainly 6 issues fits a trade nicely. I do feel for people that buy a trade and go, oh, wait a minute, this isn't the whole story as well. But I am intrigued, and honestly, I think, again, being a planetary fan, and also not realizing that Michael Cray is Deathblow, I'm like, wait a minute, okay, that's He was one of the exceptions.
Yeah.
Where I've read a few stories.
Well, Warren's doing he's doing really interesting work with this new iteration of Wildstorm, and I mean, again, it's like the Dennis Bill situation. You know, you just don't think like, oh, you know, I might work with Warren Ellis next year. Like, you don't think something like that's crazy. That's a crazy person's thought. You know, comics is the most insane entertainment industry, specifically for that reason. Because once you start doing things for the bigger companies, you are suddenly thrown into a scenario where you're sitting alongside people that you've like admired and read their work and studied their work, and it's not really gradual. When it happens super quickly. I was just at San Diego Comic-Con. I'm sitting on a panel. I've got Joel on my right side. Cool. I've got Tom on my left side. I've got Peter next to Tom.
Which Peter?
You know, and Tomasi.
Oh, Pete Tomasi, sure.
Because Peter's going to take over after James. James is going to do another 5-issue, I believe, and then Peter takes over afterwards.
For Detective, okay.
Yeah. And you're like, well, why am I doing up on a panel with Tom King, Joel Jones, Peter Tomasi? Like, why am I here? What do I have to say? I should be down there, like raising my hand, stepping up to the mic, asking a question. So my journey in comics has been really surreal, John. Awesome. I mean, even to be here talking with you, like I listen to your show,
thank you. That's very
and nice. To the people you speak to, and you're so good at what you do too.
Well, that's very nice. I truly appreciate that, genuinely. And again, that's great because you know this is all new. You know, relatively speaking, and especially working at DC. But I can tell you that obviously Bendis feels the same way about the various artists that he is working with, and you know, there's a 20-year vet
for sure.
That's 25-year vet that's saying the same thing, and it's like I can't believe I'm working with Artist X, and it's like that's amazing. So
I was just at that DC Writers Summit that they did, and you know, you're in a room with Bendis and Tom and Scott and Kelly DeConnick, you know, and you're just like, whoa, this is a crazy room to be in.
Like, that's great. Man. That's excellent.
I mean, this is an insane room to be in. So I tell people, like, I fully intend to continue to write comics because I think I'm only beginning to learn what I want to do in the form. You know, I'm so far from where I'd want to be. I'm really glad that people are getting entertainment value from what I'm doing, and I do think that they are quality stories. But I'm also very cognizant of what can be accomplished in the craft and how I want to, you know, strengthen and expand my skills. So I plan to continue to write comics. But I tell people all the time, if for some reason I couldn't write any more comics, I would be kind of satisfied with what I've been able to do so far.
That's great.
You know, like my inner 13-year-old is elated. You know, like it's I feel like I'm living in the bonus round of life now.
That's great. Well, that's a good place to be, man. That's wonderful. That's great to hear. And again, I think your detective run is terrific. And there's a good catalog of Bryan Edward Hill comics to go through. And I'm glad to hear that you want to continue and do more. But we're not done talking, I hope, because
no.
Okay, good.
No, I was having a sojourn into
self-reflective moment. I respect that.
Yes, I was becoming wistful.
That's all good. That's all good. Well, I want to get back to TV first before we talk about Titans. I'm interested in Ash versus Evil Dead. What kind of writing room? And I want you to compare the two writing rooms again without getting into spoilery details.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So tell me about Ash and Evil Dead. First of all, was it like were you helping break the season, or are you going off and writing your story and it's tinkered with? How did it all work?
Well, Mark liked to have everyone in the room breaking story. He likes to have us all there, kind of firing off ideas. And if anyone's listening to this and doesn't really know what a TV writer's room is, so TV shows are generally written by groups of writers rather than one person. And the writers all meet Monday through Friday, just like any other job. We go to a place and we just do what's called breaking story, which is figuring out the plot of the individual episodes, figuring out the arc of the entire season, all of that. And everyone's sort of spitfiring ideas, and they all go up to the board. And the showrunner is the person that decides what will stay and what will go and kind of steers things in directions, almost like the captain of that squad. So it was, it was my first television thing. And I'm pretty good at pretending I know how to do something until I know how to do it. Like, I'm all right at that. There was an old NBC show called The Pretender. They used to call me that in NYU. Like, well, Brian will just pretend and we'll get through it. So the first couple of weeks, I was just like, okay, I think I can pretend to be a TV writer until I catch on. But because we're working on Evil Dead and I'm a horror fan, I'm a big horror fan. Like one of my bucket list checks is directing a horror film.
Cool.
So I'm a huge horror fan. I'm very familiar with Ash and all of that, Boomstick,
Sure.
So I came in with a good knowledge of the material. And the great thing is Ivan Raimi was part of our writer's room. So we got, Ivan Raimi is Sam Raimi's brother.
Oh, of course. All right, yeah, shame on me. All right, yeah.
Who's like, wrote Darkman, wrote the Evil Dead stuff with Sam, worked with Sam.
Wow, I didn't realize that. I know his actor brother, Ted, of course, but yeah, I didn't.
Ted, yeah.
Interesting.
So all the Raimis are kind of like hyper involved creatively, and I think Ivan has a writing credit for Darkman, I believe, among other things. So when you have Ivan in the room, you can literally ask a Raimi if that's the universe.
Sure.
You can just turn over and be like, would Ash do that? And Ivan would kind of tell you, and it would be awesome. It was just such a fun experience because it's such a fun character. It's a no pun intended, a devil may care world where you can do sort of whatever you want. And so we were able to flex our imagination. So the tricky part, John, that show was in a half-hour format.
Right. Yes.
But it wasn't a sitcom.
Right.
So you don't have a lot of pages for your story. I mean, if you have 2 action sequences, which generally every show did, you only really had maybe like 10 or so pages of character dialogue, just pure scene work to push the narrative forward, to push the plot forward and all that. So the efficiency was tricky, but that's where comics really helped me out because comics are, in my experience, the most efficient form of storytelling. Like, if a novel is limitless words, you can be Leo Tolstoy if you want to be. And the screenplay has many more rules than a novel, but less rules than a television episode of 60 pages. Then a comic book, you've got 20 or 22 pages usually, and you probably don't want to go over 5 panels a page if you don't have to. And then you got a splash page, and you got to have a page before that and a page after that. So you got to really make it all work. That experience was incredibly useful when I'm looking at having to tell what felt like 60 pages of story inside of a 20-something page script.
Sure.
So
yes.
I saw the relationship of forms when I was working there, and it was great. I met Lucy Lawless. Like, I was just sitting in my little writer's room office one day, and I hear this New Zealand voice that speaks directly from like my 2002 days. Sure. and I turn around, and Lucy Lawless is standing there, just looking awesome in Lucy Lawless, because I don't think she can do anything but be awesome. And the first thing she asked me was, did I know where the pretzels were? And that became a quest. That became my reason to exist, was finding pretzels for Lucy Lawless. Like, I took the charge from my queen, and I would bring her pretzels. And I did. And she said thank you. And that was the best day I'd had in a long time.
I get it.
You have to kind of backstroke through the surrealism of life sometimes, John. Like that's what that was. So, that was really cool. I didn't get to go to the production because that was New Zealand, and only
they shot it down there.
Yeah, the higher levels, like the upper levels, like Mark, Rob Fresco, they went down to observe production. I didn't.
So Bruce was never. Bruce Campbell was never in the room as far as writing and stuff.
Bruce had already gone to New Zealand to prep for the season. Sure. So Bruce, I never got to meet Bruce. The season 2 guys met Bruce, but I never got to meet Bruce. I met everyone else. I met Dana, met Ray, met Lucy, and that was I mean, I couldn't ask for a better first season of TV experience. But you don't want your first season of television to be The Wire, right? Like, I think you want to kind of wade in with something where you can feel safe to experiment and make mistakes and all of that. I'm glad my first season wasn't Westworld. Or,
I hear you.
It's heavy, right? It's heavy.
I hear
like a lot.
I know. Very nihilistic. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot. Like, you got to kind of know what you're doing when you do that. So that was it. I learned a lot about ideation from how the other writers came up with ideas, and I learned and how to be a better collaborator. It's made it easier when I work with artists on my comics, for sure. Like just being able to communicate your ideas. And the Titans room was different. It was still great. I mean, never had a bad day in the room. But it's an hour-long show.
Okay. Yeah.
In the room, we had our showrunner, Greg Walker, who has done years and years of awesome TV. X-Files, Without a Trace.
X-Files. What else?
Like X-Files, Without a Trace.
Sure.
Extant. He did some work on. Some prestige stuff that Greg will be mad that I don't know, but he's an awesome guy.
Cool.
And Jeff Johns was in the room a lot of time. I mean, as much as we could get Jeff, because he was busy, doing those $200 million Jeff Johns things.
I'm with you. Yeah,
but,
yeah.
He was in the room, breaking story. And to watch Jeff Johns go from a whiteboard to having a story broken, that's an education. That's like a, 30-minute education. You will be a better storyteller just by watching him do that. And we got to see that a few times a week. And then Akiva Goldsman was in the room, who's written 40% of my Blu-ray collection.
I'm with you. Yeah. Sure.
So that's a pretty crazy room, right?
Yeah.
And then we had other people like Gabrielle Stanton. She'd ran Haven for a while on Sci-Fi and had done tons of TV. We just had Richard Haddam. He's a good friend of mine now, and he has written everything from Steven Seagal movies to working on Once Upon a Time and a bunch of stuff.
Cool.
So that it was just a really high energy environment. And we were in the Berlanti compound that exists here in LA, where all the Berlanti shows kind of meet up. So I got to meet the Black Lightning writers, got to meet the Riverdale writers, Arrow, Flash, Legends, they're all there. And yeah, it was a really interesting experience. And it didn't become concrete for me what we were really doing until I was in Toronto, because I did get to go to production for this.
Cool.
And I was in there about 6 weeks because my episodes, I'd worked on 2 episodes, and those episodes wound up shooting back to back, strangely enough.
Interesting.
And so I was up in Toronto for a month and a half. And it really became, crystal clear when Brenton Thwaites came out in the Robin suit. Because I hadn't seen him in the suit. I've seen pictures of the suit. We saw designs, and I think everyone's seen the production art now.
Yep.
That's been released.
The trailer, of course.
But I hadn't seen him in the suit, man. So when he comes out and he's wearing that suit, you're like, that's Robin. You just turn into a kid for a second because he just looks so much like you think Dick Grayson would look. He's got the hair, he's got the jaw, he has a little bit of that swagger that you want him to have. And I had to take a beat and be like, whoa, this is really happening. You are a kid who grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, buying comics with your allowance, everyone telling you it was a waste of time. And now, you're in Canada, watching this guy play Dick Grayson, on a monitor and 15 feet away from you. It is, I can't explain just how wild that experience can be. But it was really great that first season, and I'm excited for people to take a look at what it is, because Jeff put so much of his kind of heart and soul into it. Everyone did, Akiva and Greg and all that. So it's on the way. It's on that DC streaming service. Go ahead, sign up for that. There's really cool things coming. I just saw the announcement today that Cyborg is going to be on Doom Patrol, and that's really good. That's
amazing. We had actually that's more CW news about Batwoman showing up.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Everything, but I think that's this is honestly, I really do think the DC universe, as far as the television product, is in great hands. And I'll admit, obviously the elephant in the room is the fuck Batman moment in the Titans trailer.
Here's a funny story.
Please.
So
yes.
that trailer dropped, I think a day or so after my Detective Comics issue came out. Right? Okay. And I think it was the 3rd issue or something. And because right before Comic-Con.
Yeah, exactly.
And people had been I'm very grateful for all of the people that have seemingly enjoyed the story I've been telling in the comics. So I wake up and my Twitter feed is blowing up. My notifications with fuck Batman, fuck Batman, fuck Batman, fuck Batman. And I thought every Batman fan in the world had turned against me because of something I had written. I was like, what did I write?
Man.
Like, what did he do? He didn't do anything. I went back and reread it, and like I don't understand. And so I'm looking at, because I didn't know the trailer was out, so I'm looking at all this stuff, and my Twitter feed is like, and I'm rereading the issue trying to find out what Batman did that they couldn't handle, and I was like, but he just, I mean, he kicked a guy, but Batman does that. I'm not the first guy to have Batman kick a guy.
So,
and then I saw the trailer. I was relieved. I was like, oh, fine. The trailer, Titans, great, awesome, cool. You know, I thought I had like overturned the whole apple cart of Bat family across the world, and would be banished from all of comicdom. But yeah. People ask me all the time, "Did you write that line?" It's like, no, I didn't write the line. That was I don't remember what script it was in or something. It kind of came in there. But yeah, it was cool to see like all of the reactions and everything to it once I realized it wasn't unilateral rejection of my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So, provocative moment, obviously, which I think is wise to put in a trailer and have people. Sometimes you got to hit people in the nose and have them say, "Wait a minute, how dare you?" Because hopefully then the reaction is, "Well, I want to see what leads up to this and what happens." And then there are those who are like, "Oh, well, then fuck this. This isn't my Titans." So I have to ask did they have, I know they had a DC Universe panel. Did they have a Titans panel, and were you on it?
We did not have a Titans panel at SDCC. We had the DC like kind of script to screen panel that I did.
Okay.
The Bensons were there, and Lamont from Black Lightning was on that.
Terrific.
So we didn't do like a Titans specific panel, but I was the only. Marv was there, so we had Marv Wolfman, but I was the only.
Go on.
Yeah, he's awesome, right? Like again, you're sitting next to Marv Wolfman. There was Michael Mann is right next to you, so you should talk, Brian. So I was there, kind of answering some questions, but it was mostly just people asking me about that line,
of course,
and
So fuck Batman. Exactly what do you mean?
Right. So I answered that question quite a few times, but yeah, no, people have been pretty cool.
Was there a reaction from Marv regarding fuck Batman?
No, Marv is one of the nicest human beings you'll ever meet.
Agreed.
So I don't know if he saw the line because the trailer was up there.
Sure.
He didn't react to it, but I tell you what, like profanity around Marv kind of made me feel bad.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's really interesting.
Because he's such a nice guy.
Well,
like Marv is not a guy you think about cursing in front of.
Well, and also not to age the man and everything, but he is at that grandfatherly age, so I get that as well.
Yeah, every creator, we all have our lines we don't cross. We have our things we won't do. But it's like I think it's simultaneously perfectly acceptable for a person to say, I don't want to experience that story because of what that story is about, and I also think it's perfectly acceptable for a creator to say, well, I would like to tell this story because, I have these things I want to express, and to kind of let people decide what they want to experience and what they want to support. And if something does come up against your ethics, I think it's perfectly acceptable to be like, nope, I'm not going to engage that. But if we do not continually challenge our ethics, we will forget what our ethics are, right? And we need to have provocation, and I don't mean that in like the dime store, Alex Jones, like they're gonna turn the frogs against it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like actual like provocation, like something that provokes you to think, to react, to respond, whatever it is. I do think that work is important, and we do come with the pitchforks and the torches very fast, and it's something I think that we should consider, for sure. And then you make a decision, like, do you want your young person reading that book? You could say no, or you could say yes, and I think those conversations are really important. I think being able to table that stuff and talk about what it makes you feel is really important. Yes, but I'm that guy. Like I grew up, reading like Frank Miller and Grant Morrison, and Hemingway and
Sure.
Joan Didion and all of that, right? So I've always kind of been kind of in the frequency of the provocateur in what I liked to consume, as a viewer, as a reader, as a listener, or whatever it is. So I'm probably a bit more prone to extremity than some people are.
Understood. Tara, by the way, of course, and shame on us, of course, Markovian as well.
Yes.
Shame on us for not remembering Tara's name, or at least for me.
Yeah.
But man, no, it's and again, I think I agree with you, man. As I've said before on Word Balloon, I was 9. I didn't read the original Green Goblin dying, or Gwen Stacy dying at the hands of the Goblin, but I read the Marvel Tales when I was 9 years old. And Jerry Conway blew my 9-year-old mind in the best possible way of, wow, there are real consequences. The good guys don't always win. And sometimes, the moment that you think, that great dramatic moment of, wait a minute, you're not dead, I saved you. What the hell's going on? And it's that sad, tragic, dramatic moment. Those are great kind of, I think, creative moments for the right readers. And I think it does. I think it expands their mind. I don't think and again, everyone is different, but it's not necessarily going to be a traumatic moment. It might be a very mind-evolving moment of understanding that, there are bigger consequences than the bad guys always lose and the good guys always win. So, no, I think that's great. And I appreciate that kind of ambition. And again, the mores of society is society. You do the best you can. You ride with the wave, I guess. And, you decide, like you said, are you going to be a provocateur or are you going to be, a get along, go along kind of person? And who knows? Those are choices.
Mythology is super important to us as a culture. I was just having a conversation with someone yesterday. I was in a meeting and I was talking about how we tend to devalue philosophy as a pursuit. So you don't really get introduced to a lot of philosophy. I mean, you may be in college, depending on what courses you take, but definitely not in high school, kind of where you need it, right?
Yeah.
But, stories are where philosophy lives now. For a lot of people, a story might be the first place they get an idea, a concept. So it's important to remember that when you are kind of weaving your narratives. At least I do. Like, I try to think about, like, what is this about? What does this mean? Am I just being provocative for the sake of being provocative, or is there a purpose to this?
Sure.
At least do I perceive a purpose to it? Because the engagement of those ideas is critically important to how we grow and evolve and kind of work our way through our own problems. I mean, philosophy and storytelling have always been interlinked, and storytelling is how we explain what lives in the dark. It's how we told people that even though the ice is here, the sun will come, the crops will rise. Stories, they matter in that way. And if we tell storytellers, well, there are limits to the evil you can portray. There are limits to the words you can use, the moments that you can dramatize. Then we're deliberately kind of diluting the power of mythology, because there are no limits to what evil can perform in the real world. So if our stories can't match, I think, the potential consequence of actual life, then our stories aren't doing their philosophical job of preparing us for those potential consequences.
Fair enough. Like I said, I do believe that when it comes to the television world, that the DC Universe is in good hands. And, despite that kind of controversy over fuck Batman, I'm certainly going to...
I just laugh every time I hear it.
I know, it's ridiculous. Absolutely. It's hilarious. So, Orlando sent me a picture last night of Amigo, of Robin, and they superimposed fuck Batman on the top of the box.
It's hilarious.
No, I'm with you, man. Well, and had you ever seen that great fan film, Grayson, fake trailer for a movie that never happened, but it was kind of adult Dick coming back to the Robin character after Batman dies and trying to solve the mystery of who killed Batman?
Yeah, I saw a little bit of that. I also saw there's a group of guys that do I forget the name of it, but they have this Nightwing series on YouTube.
Yes.
That I watched,
Sure.
and I was crazy impressed with how much work they'd put into it. I think they were a group of filmmakers out of Las Vegas or something, and they had everything from pyrotechnics to real stunt effects and actual costumes. I was really impressed with the amount of effort that had gone into it.
Are you a Star Trek person?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not I'm probably not as Star Trek as Mark Bernardin.
Okay.
But I'm pretty Star Trek,
I've talked to Mark. I haven't had Mark on in a while, but
I can't keep up with Mark. On most things, I can't keep up with Mark, but I know my way around a bridge for sure.
Because I was going to say, a lot of the fan films before CBS and Paramount decided to kind of in the same Star Wars way, and I get it. I understand why they did it, but there were a couple fan film productions that. To me, and I would always describe this to hardcore Star Trek fans that hadn't seen them, I'm like, it's like watching a good, and I mean this in the most positive way, a good college acting corps production of a Star Trek episode. That said, just like you said about the Nightwing stuff, the special effects that they did were incredibly ambitious, and also the one show in particular, which I think was called Star Trek Continues, they even managed to make the lens filters and the lighting and the sets really look like the 60s show.
Well, technology is...
Yeah, go on.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, please.
So, so I'm a filmmaker. I just, need to make more films. But technology used to be the velvet rope that could prevent you from making a professional thing.
Yes.
Now... we have 4K cameras on our phones.
Yep.
Right? You can edit on anything and you can learn CGI from YouTube instructional videos. So the line between what is an official corporate product and what is not is really hard to ascertain sometimes. I realized how important it is for people to, kind of maintain the sanctity of their rights when I was working on a death short film a few years ago. So there was a friend of mine, an actor, her name is Susie Block. She looks just like Death
from
the Game.
You meant Sandman Death, but go on.
Yeah, she looks just like Death from the Game and stuff, right? So I was like, well, Susie, why don't we do a death short film and kind of tell it in the voice of 80s Michael Mann Manhunter, because that's how my brain works.
Nice.
And she was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We'll go ahead and do that. So I had started doing some stuff, and I made a little trailer thing, and I put it online, and I hadn't shot the whole short yet, but I had footage, and I've cut it together, and put a song on it and the whole deal. And then I got a cease and desist, not even a cease and desist. A friend of mine over at Warner Brothers was like, Brian, can you take that down? And I was like, why? It's just a short. I'm not trying to make money off of it. I just think it'd be a neat little thing to do. And they're like, do you understand that you are a professional screenwriter with credits? So if you make a thing based on our thing, the world gets confused.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I was like, oh, because I don't see myself as I don't see myself on that side of the thing. I see myself on the other side of the thing still,
sure.
Right?
Sure.
So I just thought I was going to knock around and make something cool for my friends, and then we'll just see what we have. I didn't realize that if I continued to promote it, it could turn into a strange press release and wind up on Bleeding Cool or something.
Well, or like you said, or have an entire conglomerate mad at you, which
have a whole conglomerate mad. Because if you make choices that they weren't going to make, and then they got to deal with the fact that you made those choices, I get it. I do get it. It's
Star Trek Axonar. That's the exact problem that those guys had, and and it's a shame because it's a great kind of proof of concept 20-minute movie in that specific case. And then it's like, hey, wait a minute, we're trying to make our thing. So back off, man. And it's a shame. And it's funny because we mentioned Scalped earlier. I remember seeing a really good student film that took a scene from Scalped. And I talked to Jason about it and stuff, and he was, he'd seen it as well. And no, I think that stuff is interesting. And again, you're right. I mean, this podcast is, in a very small way, proof of how technology has been democratized, if that's the right word.
Yeah.
And it's just easier for us average Joes to like do our own thing. And it's like, hey man, don't wait for that person to read your great, concept of a film or something like that. Go out and shoot it. And
I tell people that all the time. You just got to make stuff.
Yeah. And this is the radio show I always wanted to hear, and that's why I've been doing it for the last 13 years, in the 14th year now. It's a great time, but again, it's like, well, as much as you love Spider-Man, it's like, be aware that Disney has a lot of money, and they're gonna like kind of if you do too good of a job,
they have to be. Yeah, because we're so close to being able to replicate the effects, in our short work and in our kind of homegrown work. And now, where you have I might be the last generation that considers a theatrical release the primary way to watch a film.
I hear you. Yes.
I work with some young people every now and then, just kind of doing a lot of kind of talks and kind of helping people get through self-esteem issues and all of that, and trying to refocus kids that are maybe made some bad choices and they got to get themselves back.
Well, that makes sense for your detective story, but go on, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Jefferson Pierce's stuff is based on my experience kind of working with kids.
That's great.
But it's amazing how bad the quality is of what they will watch, and they don't care.
Yes. No, you're right, man. No, my focus group is my two 20-something nephews who I go to all the time, and frankly, even the 22-year-old is kind of too old, and I should probably be talking to some tweeners and everything that are But you're right. Go on.
Yeah, if the image is if the image is degrading, if it's stuttering, if they're watching it on the face of a watch, they just don't care.
Yeah.
So now, because people are, I don't need it to be on a 50-foot screen for me to enjoy it. I can watch it on my computer. I can watch it on my slate. I can watch it on my phone, whatever it is. There's so little difference between, watching someone's YouTube film on your phone and watching $100 million film on your phone when you just have it at that size, that it's remarkable how good this content can be. It's really exciting as an artist, as a creator. I think it's super exciting. But I can understand as a rights holder, it puts you in a weird position because you have to be the person telling someone who loves your stuff that they can't show that love by making something.
Agreed.
And it's a hard place to be, but I do get the business reasons behind it.
Well, and again, this is something I think the studios and the networks have never had to face before. I mean, and that's sure. As a broadcaster watching all these industries react to the citizen media that's being generated, I love it, and I'm part of the movement, but I'm also part of the broadcast world, so it's very, very interesting. I do see both sides. God, I feel like Trump. Both sides.
Both sides.
Every time I have to say both sides, I'm like, oh, that asshole. But anyway, but yeah, it's very, very interesting. And
well, I mean, looking at Trump, not like the political part of it, but just literally, this is a guy who's born from citizen media.
Oh, absolutely. Good Lord.
I mean, he's a billionaire and the rest of it, and he got money, Apprentice, and the whole thing. But without citizen media, a grassroots campaign like that wouldn't have worked. So we're in this new age where, crowdfunding and social media and, just everyone becoming broadcasters and, and it's, I don't think we appreciate, not you specifically, but I don't think culture appreciates the moment that we're in. I think we will 25 years from now look back at this moment we're in and realize that's when those big changes really started to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Wherever we wind up, we're in the moment of the chaotic change.
Yes. Right now,
and it's fascinating to sort of see it kind of unfold in real time.
We're all in the back seat, and I have this recurring dream every now and then that I'm in the back seat of a car and nobody's behind the wheel, and it's like I know the way that. Yeah. If you have extra time, I think I'll explain more, and maybe you can help me out with that when you're not helping the kids. But no,
right on.
But yeah, it's and I'll also admit because I left a couple big broadcasting companies recently, changed jobs and stuff, that man, some of the suits, and I'm only talking about my own experience, and again, this is my comments. You don't have to chime in if you don't want to. But part of my joy is that the CEOs in the suits, they don't know how it's all going to shake out. And that's why they're freaking out as well. And they will put a brave face on when they need to. And especially in a radio broadcasting world where, we understand this podcasting thing. And it's like, bullshit you do, because none of us do. And I know that as a foot soldier. And I know the Emperor has no clothes, and it's great to work with people in radio that don't take that attitude and are like, hey, we're all just trying to figure this out. And it's like, great. And luckily, currently, I'm working with those kinds of people in broadcasting, so that's a relief. But yeah, it's
you're like the perfect storm, John. Like, because you're someone who knows the in and outs of the traditional sort of radio broadcasting world, right? So now you can apply all of that knowledge to your own endeavors.
Exactly.
And that's a very kind of unique sort of place to be, because you understand a bit. Like it's like if I were try to make my own television show on YouTube, not like funded by YouTube, but like I just went off and did it on my own.
Yeah.
Well, I'd be taking everything I've learned from TV for working in 2 television seasons, which isn't a lot. Like it isn't the most, but it might be enough to kind of make this choice instead of that choice, make this choice instead of that choice, and then the resulting work might be a little sharper, like a little more penetrative and all that. I think it's a net positive.
Yes.
But we just have to kind of just be careful, with
man.
the hyperbole of it all.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, it's a fascinating time. And again, I don't claim to have answers. I am, like you said, taking what I've learned and applying it to Word Balloon, certainly. And keeping my options open in radio, and hopefully things will progress the way I want them to. But yeah, it's a fun time. And like it's forgive the schadenfreude, but yeah, sometimes it's more the people that I no longer work with, and they're either bullshit of, oh yeah, we know what's going on, or their real belief that they think they do, and they clearly don't. And it's just like, well, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck.
It's kind of a moment of chaos and deep opportunity. And in situations like this and kind of eras like this, it's good to be the small, nimble ship.
Agreed.
And not the huge ship that takes a week to turn around.
Damn straight. Right? Yes, sir. I've said the same analogy. Absolutely. Yep.
You got to be nimble right now. Yep. You got to be able to react and really be able to make those degree shifts quickly, because just like sticking to the same old plan, same old thing. I mean, you heard about the Oscars thing now, where they want to create a new category.
Popular movie, which I
because they're trying to keep up.
Huh?
They're trying to keep up. They're just trying to,
but
like, we got to be relevant. How do we be relevant?
But isn't that funny, Brian? Because literally, that's been at least a 20-year argument, at least. Yeah,
absolutely.
And so that is interesting that the ship finally turned 20 years later, and they're like, okay, we get it now. So, and it's sure. I appreciate that, but I mean, God, just like you said about going to the movies now, shock and awe. I was going to bring it up, and that reminds me to talk to you about that real fast. The Rob Reiner movie about the beginnings of the Iraqi War, and it was the Iraqi War. And I had to remind myself.
It was.
But yeah, that Reiner put the movie out not only in theaters, but knowing what really does happen these days in theaters, he also put it online. So you can watch it and buy it on iTunes for a reasonable price, rent it for a reasonable price, less than a movie ticket, or you can go to the theater and see it. So it's both. And there aren't a ton of movies that are doing that, but it seems that now the less blockbustery movies are really kind of making that move, and I think it's a smart move, because I know there are movies where I'm like, oh, that's interesting, but I don't need to see that on a big screen. I can wait for that. I'll wait.
Well,
I used
to work in marketing and advertising when I came out of NYU, because I had a film degree, and that's useless, so I had to figure out some way to eat.
I hear you.
So I worked at, they cared a little bit about that, so I got to work there and, pay my bills, get insurance, get a tooth fixed. But, I used to always say, I don't, and this is me talking as a 22-year-old, like, I don't think you can change consumer behavior. I think you have to respond to it.
Exactly. Yep.
and certain people in the company would be like, yeah, well, what Brian's saying makes sense. We agree. And other people would just be too staid about it. Like, nope, we are, this is what we're going to do. We're going to force them. And look, if people want to consume things on tablets and phones and whatever, and you're not going to be present on that platform, then they will find things to consume that are present on that platform. By the time you get there, they've already locked in their habits, Like, you've got your dedicated listeners. So, like, they're your listeners. They follow you to where you go and all of that. And when like corporations come to podcasters and YouTubers, they say, well, hey, we see all the attention you're getting and the platform you're building. You should come work with us. People are like, well, but I don't want to.
Right. Right.
Because I don't have your oversight and I'm doing fine. What are you giving me that I can't give myself?
Right. And what rules do I have to comply to compromise to fit your square or your box?
To fit your square.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Like, it's, and the result of that is you get really unique content. So instead of me doing a 15-minute or a 6-minute piece for like NPR, right, or for some other radio platform, right, that just like, okay, we're going to talk about comics for like a little bit. We got Bryan Hill here, whatever. Get the piece in, get the piece out, go to the ad. You can do multiple hours deep dive in a way that they can't, which is what your audience wants, and your audience is a lot of people, and so if I'm getting a real conversation with creators, like if John and Tom King are talking for a couple hours, I much rather follow that than get my comic book minute over here on this corporate thing,
Exactly.
and I think we're creating consumers that really want specific solutions to their entertainment needs. And they're not taking general anymore. People want something that is uniquely constructed for them because there's so many choices they can find something.
Agreed. And the network programming and the citizen media generated programming, it's all coming out of the same places because they are watching their television shows on Hulu and other online platforms, along with watching it on television. That television is now just one option. And no, you get it, Brian, and exactly. And I appreciate you articulating it the way that you did because this is when I am like, okay, all right. Again, I don't know everything. I think I'm going in the right direction. My audience is following, and so that's good. All right, so we won't need couch time. I think I won't have to tell you more about my crazy dreams other than the nobody driving the car. So.
Right on. Well, I believe in your crazy dreams, so.
Hey man, honestly, this is great. It was a great conversation, and especially this end part, which only I think inspires a lot of creative people that want to make their own comics, that want to make their own stuff, and that is like why I like getting into talking about these circles as well as just about comic books specifically. So, continued success. I am very excited about Titans. I got to sit down and watch your episodes of Ash and Evil Dead. And I'm intrigued that it is in the half-hour format. I forgot about that. Dana Gould was telling me about that, too. Are you watching Stand Against Evil as a horror fan?
Yeah. I've watched a little bit of it. I tried not to watch it while I was working on Evil Dead because I didn't want to bring it into the room.
Sure.
But, I watched it. I mean, I love McGinley, so
me too.
I'll follow that guy, from project to project to project. But, I think it's really cool. I think, this again, like, that's where we are now, where a show like that can get out there and find a little bit of an audience, whereas before when you had 3 networks or 5 networks or even 10 networks, it wouldn't. But now we've got choices.
Well, and Bobcat's show. I haven't watched Bobcat's show yet.
Yeah. I saw the ads in Detective, but I haven't been able to tune into it yet.
I noticed that.
I grew up on that guy. That guy is hilarious. So I'm a big Bobcat fan.
Yeah, me too. And honestly, I'm a big fan of his films as well. I think he's a really interesting filmmaker. So
Shakes the Clown, man. That was the movie when I was in high school. Like,
hilarious.
If you had the VHS tape with Shakes the Clown on it, you were popular.
I felt the same way. I think I was just out of college because it was like maybe my senior year or something like that. It was like 87, 88, something like that, right?
Yeah. I got to petition Scream Factory to get like a prestige DVD release of Shakes the Clown.
I have a feeling it did come out finally, either on Blu-ray. I think it did because.
Oh, right on! I got to track that down. Pick that up.
Yeah, I just heard Bobcat on with Leonard Maltin and on his podcast. Ooh. and he was talking about a screening of it, and I think that was one of the reasons why they were doing a screening was that it might have finally made it to Blu-ray. So
yeah,
I hope so.
I'm going to Amazon right after this,
right, we'll find out.
See if I can give Mr. Goldthwait some money.
But really, man, nice going in the comics, nice going with the TV, and
thank you so much, John.
Yeah, please come back. We'll further the discussion, and I'll get deeper into the comics and television worlds of Bryan Edward Hill.
Oh, sure. And, when Titans premieres and it's out and I can talk about it, I'm happy to come back on and give you a little bit more insight into the series. I just can't say much now because it's not out yet. But
man.
I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay, that's great. Because truly, I do appreciate yourself and Joe Henderson and some of the other guys, Jeff Loeb certainly, that has their feet both in comics and in the Bensons, of course, and the TV world, because, as we've said, interesting times, and it's great to get a ringside perspective that you guys have. So, no, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
There you go, Bryan Edward Hill. I hope you enjoyed today's Word Balloon conversation. Again, it was brought to you by InStock Trades at InStockTrades.com. Let's see what else is going on this week at InStock Trades. Wednesday can't get here quick enough. You've got the Human Torch and the Thing Strange Tales collection. This is, Stan, Jack, Larry Lieber, Dick Ayers, really great stuff. And this is way back in the 60s when the Human Torch and the Thing were the leads. I believe that's where they wore their Beatle wigs, was in this collection. But that book is 42% off. It's $23.19. There's JSA by Jeff Johns. It's funny, we just had Jerry Ordway on the show about a month ago. But this is a great collection of 16 through 25. This must be Volume 2. It absolutely is. And it's 400 pages, 42% off, $17.39. There's Ed Brubaker's final volume of Kill or Be Killed, Volume 4. Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips, what a great team. What a great series. 15 through 20 is Volume 4's contents, and it's 176 pages, 42% off, $9.85. There's also Harley Quinn trade paperback volume 6, and that is by Frank Thierry and Inaki Miranda. It's 42% off, $11.59. Some of the great books available at InStockTrades.com. Check it out. Great books at great prices. If you have an order of $50 or more, you'll receive free shipping from InStockTrades.com. Word Balloon is also brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Now, I said it earlier, all of my panels at Terrificon, they're going to be going up weekly, and that's going to start at the end of this week. And again, I think the framework for it should be Word Balloon 101, Word Balloon University, because these are like lectures from some amazing comic book creators. They are fantastic, candid conversations. I can't believe in some of the directions they went into. You will hear which legendary comic book creators never liked Robin, never felt he belonged in Batman. Very interesting stuff. I'm not saying you're going to have to listen to the panels. Great Marvel cosmic conversations between Roy Thomas and Jim Starlin, and an Infinity Gauntlet conversation between Starlin, Ron Lim, and Joe Rubenstein, the art team and the great writer of the Infinity Gauntlet. Really amazing stuff. Hats off to the Terrificon guests as well, the people that came. The fans asked great questions. So really great discussions. Like I said, it felt like a lecture series. So consider Word Balloon University open for back-to-school season and take the 8-week course. Or you can go to patreon.com and get the course in advance if you subscribe to Word Balloon. It's my way of saying thank you to the League of Word Balloon listeners for your continued support via Patreon. Patreon.com/Word Balloon, or go to the Patreon ad at wordballoon.com. Thanks for listening. Just in a couple of days, we're going to have that first episode from Terrificon. Also, going to be talking to Bill Morrison as I'm recording this about Yellow Submarine, Mad Magazine, and sadly, the end of Bill's old stomping grounds, Bongo Comics. Also, Mike Norton and I will be doing a live Word Balloon session. That is going to be at Challengers Comics on Wednesday at 5 o'clock. I hope you'll come and watch us do it. And also, I hope to be doing this on Twitch. So be watching your social media. Follow me on Twitter at John Word Balloon, or my Facebook page under my name, John Suntress, and also the Word Balloon Network for announcements. I'm also on Instagram under Word Balloon. all those places I will be making those announcements and letting you know about, hopefully, Word Balloon's first Twitch. I hope you'll join me Wednesday afternoon for that. And again, on social media, I'll remind you, don't worry. So thanks for listening. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2018.